Persuasion, Jane Austen's last completed novel, and often thought of as her most mature. The story about second chances, regrets, and quiet triumph of consistency. But how on earth do you bring all of that to life on screen? So over the years, we've had four major adaptations to wrestle with. There's the 1971 BBC production, the much-loved 95 film, the 2007 ITV version, and more recently, the 2022 Netflix attempt. Each one takes its own path, sometimes faithfully, sometimes, let's just say, adventurously. The novel itself is, of course, the gold standard. What I want to do in this video is to use those adaptations as a way of exploring how directors and actors have chosen to interpret Austen's characters and themes. So let's take a look at these four adaptations, kind of side by side, and see what they get right and what they get wrong, and why it's so difficult to adapt Austen's most delicate novel in the first place. Along the way, I'll dip into casting choices, a few familiar faces you might recognise from other Austen adaptations, and the quirks that make each version distinct. And yes, I will be steering clear of modern gimmicks like breaking the fourth wall, because unless Jane Austen wrote it in her text, it's not really Austen, is it? So with that little caveat out of the way, let's step into the world of Persuasion on screen. Now, before we dive into which adaptation nailed it and which went wildly off course, it's worth asking, why is Persuasion so difficult to adapt in the first place? And the problem, or maybe the beauty, is that Austen's story here is quiet. It's not Pride and Prejudice with its witty jewels of words, or Sense and Sensibility with all its open passion and heartbreak. Persuasion is about restraint. It's about what isn't said. It's about glances across the room, words swallowed back, feelings carried for years and never spoken until the very last moment. And silence, unfortunately, doesn't always make good television. Directors get nervous. They think, we can't just have Anne Elliot sitting there looking thoughtful. So they start adding things in, dramatic speeches, exaggerated humour, or even breaking the fourth wall and having Anne speak directly to camera. And yes, I'll come back to that later. The other challenge is Anne herself. She's not a sparkly 20-year-old heroine. She's 27. She's lived with regret. She's quieter, steadier. And that depth is what makes her so compelling. But on screen, if we don't have the right actor or the right script, she risks being flattened into the dull one, which couldn't be further from Austen's intention. So every adaptation has wrestled with this. How do you keep the story engaged for the audience while staying true to the delicacy of Austen's writing? Some rise to the challenge beautifully. Others, well, let's just say, they reach for a sledgehammer when a teacup would do. Let's start back in 1971 with the BBC. This was a time when television costume dramas were more like filmed plays than cinematic spectacles that we expect today. Sets were indoors, lighting was flat, and dialogue carried the day. But in that sense, the 1971 Persuasion gets one thing absolutely right. It respects Austen's words.
I must say, I hope the estate will be in a better condition then than it is now.
Quite, Lady Russell.
Whole conversations are lifted straight from the novel and delivered with the seriousness of theatre. For the modern audience, it might feel a little stiff, but think about what that would have meant in its own time. This was Austen treated as high culture, not as fluff or romance, and it set a tone that her works deserved serious dramatic treatment. And to their credit, it means you really do hear Austen's cadence and wit without it being trimmed down or over-romanticised.
I've cut off all unnecessary charities. I haven't refurnished the drawing room.
I don't see what else I can do without compromising our dignity.
For viewers in the 70s, that was a gift, a chance to see Austen almost unfiltered, at a time when the wider public didn't yet think of her as a franchise. Now jump forward to 1995. This was a golden year for Austen on screen. Pride and Prejudice with Colin Firth was dominating the BBC, and Persuasion got its moment too. What the 95 film gets so right is the tone. This is Austen stripped of gloss, no picture-perfect bonnets or endless sunlit countryside. Instead we get grit. The sea is damp and cold, Bath is crowded and noisy, Kellynch feels like an estate that actually needs running, not just a backdrop with pretty costumes. Amanda Root as Anne gives us a heroine who looks worn down by years of disappointment. You see it in her posture, her plain dresses, the way she almost shrinks from view. And Kieran Hines gives us a Wentworth who isn't the dashing romantic straight away, but a man still bristling with hurt pride. Together, they capture that incredible delicacy, two people who love each other but can't speak of it. Now, for me, this version nails the silences of Austen better than any other. Those tiny glances, pauses, and moments of unsaid meaning. And when it gets to the letter, arguably the greatest love letter in all of Austen, it lands like a thunderclap. That's why so many people still hold this as the definitive Persuasion. Then we have the 2007 version. Now, by this time, period dramas had shifted. TV audiences expected more pace, more visible emotion, and less stillness. The 2007 film delivers on that expectation. Sally Hawkins brings us an Anne who's not just quietly suffering, but deeply, visibly feeling. She has tears in her eyes. She speaks her emotions more openly, and it's more modern in style of performance, but it makes Anne instantly sympathetic, especially to viewers who might otherwise see her as too passive. And yes, there's that infamous scene of Anne running through Bath, which we'll get to in the what they got wrong section. But the intention behind it isn't bad. They wanted to show urgency, the breathless rush of a second chance of love. For viewers in 2007, raised on faster, more cinematic period drama, that worked. It captured the heartbeat under the restraint. And in that sense, it reminded audiences that Persuasion is, at its heart, a love story. One that's every bit as passionate as Austen's younger heroines, even if it wears a quieter face. And finally, Netflix in 2022. Now, I know many of you have thoughts about this one, but before we get into criticisms, let's admit what it does right. The production design is lush. The costumes, the interiors, the exteriors, all gorgeous to look at. It brings Austen's world into high definition. And then there's the intent. This adaptation was trying to bridge Austen to the Gen Z audience, to say Anne Elliot isn't just a dusty relic of Regency fiction. She's a relatable young woman who knows heartbreak and self-doubt. The fourth wall breaking, the modern slang, the informal tone.
So then just be myself.
Oh no, don't do that until at least the second year of marriage.
That may not be the worst advice.
Mr. Shepard.
Whether you love it or loathe it, the creative team were at least trying to say, Jane Austen belongs to you too. And Dakota Johnson's Anne, for all the liberties taken, does capture one truth of the character, Anne's wit.
There's nothing worse than thinking your life is ruined and then realising you've got much, much further to fall.
In the novel, she is quietly funny, self-aware and clever. Most adaptations bury that under, kind of a solemn nature of Anne. But here they actually let it surface. So yes, the execution may have gone too far, but the idea that Anne was a wry, ironic voice, that's something Austen herself would probably have appreciated. So instead of just handing out gold stars and dunce caps for these adaptations, what we get is a sweet spot, not This version is the one true Persuasion, but each one caught a different shard of Austen's mirror. Put them together and you start to see the whole picture that's actually closer to the novel than any one adaptation can manage alone. Now, as much as I admire the 1971 version for its fidelity, it also shows us the limits of the era. To modern eyes, it can feel painfully static. Characters stand in rooms and deliver lines as if they're on stage, which is what television drama of the time basically was. And Anne herself, played by Anne Furbank, is almost too muted. Austen makes it clear that Anne feels things deeply beneath her quiet surface. But in this version, she's so restrained, she risks becoming invisible. And the problem is, when you strip out the emotion and leave only the words, you miss Austen's real artistry. She wasn't writing plays, she was writing novels filled with inner lives and tiny, almost unspoken shifts. And while the 71 version is faithful to dialogue, it doesn't quite let us see Anne's heartbreak or tenderness in Wentworth's guarded glances. In that sense, fidelity becomes a trap. We end up respecting the adaptation more than loving it. Next up, the 95 version, one of my favourites, but not without its flaws. For one thing, it's a bit dour. I actually admire the grit, but some viewers find it drab, almost grey-washed. Austen, for all her social critique, also has sly humour, and this version nearly forgets to laugh. Sir Walter and Elizabeth, for example, should be deliciously ridiculous, but here they come over more sour than satirical. And then there's Anne. Amanda Root plays her beautifully, but for the first half of the film, she's filmed like a ghost, plain, silent, colourless. That's true of Anne's situation, but it risks alienating the audience before we get to see her blossom. Austen never meant Anne to be lifeless. She's quiet, but not vacant. So while the film nails the longing, it sometimes forgets the spark that Austen tucked into Anne's character from the start. Now, the 2007 ITV version, let's be honest, it's the one that gets teased the most. And I can see why. There's the famous running scene in Bath with Anne dashing through the streets as if she's auditioning for Chariots of Fire. It's unintentionally comic, which is the worst sin in Austen because the novel's climax is already perfect. All that letter needs is stillness and breath, not a foot race. More broadly, the adaptation leans too hard on making Anne modern. Sally Hawkins does a beautiful job in what she's given, but the script puts her in situations Austen would never have imagined, blurting her feelings out, weeping openly, rushing about. The whole point of Anne is that her passion is contained, her emotions are lived inwardly until they finally break through at the right moment. In trying to make her relatable, the adaptation undercuts the very power of her restraint. And yet, as I said earlier, the intention was to make Anne feel more accessible, which is worth recognising, even if the execution stumbles. And finally, the Netflix version. Where do we begin? For most Austen fans, this is the problem child, breaking the fourth wall, winking at the camera, dropping lines like, "Now we're worse than exes, we're friends." It feels less like Jane Austen and more like Bridget Jones at a masquerade ball. The issue isn't just the modern slang, it's the tone. Austen's novels are laced with irony, yes, but it's the quiet irony of observation, not the loud irony of mugging for the audience. Anne Elliot, of all heroines, would never smirk at us over a glass of wine. That kind of knowingness erases the very quality that makes her moving. That self-effacement, the patience, her quiet strength. Now, I'll be fair, Netflix was trying to reach a new audience, to make Austen feel more contemporary, but they did it by cutting against the grain of the novel rather than finding the modernity that was already within Austen's text. And that's the great irony here. Jane Austen is timeless. She doesn't need Gen Z slang to be relevant. Her characters and insights have already lasted 2 centuries. To plaster modern banter over them is like painting graffiti over a masterpiece. Eye-catching, but it makes you long for the original. One of the great pleasures of watching multiple adaptations is spotting how differently Anne, Wentworth, and the rest are brought to life, and sometimes recognising familiar faces from other corners of British film and TV. In the 71 adaptation, the casting reflects the BBC's style of the time. Stage-trained actors, strong diction, and the kind of theatrical pose that was expected. Anne Furbank, at 38, was older than Austen's Anne, 27, right? Which subtly shifts the character. Instead of a woman quietly fading into the background, she comes across as more mature, already somewhat resigned. Basil Dingham as Sir Walter is a fun spot if you're into the 60s and 70s TV. He popped up in The Prisoner and The Champions. Seeing him preening as the vain baronet gives an extra wink to TV buffs. Amanda Root and Kieran Hines anchor the 95 version, and their chemistry grows beautifully as the film goes on. But what makes the casting sing is the supporting ensemble. Sophie Thompson as Mary Musgrove is an absolute scene stealer, and here's a trivia gem. She's Emma Thompson's sister. Not only that, she later turned up in Emma as the endlessly chattering Miss Bates. Spotting her across 2 Austen worlds is like a private game for fans. And then there's Corin Redgrave as Sir Walter. It's another inspired choice. He brings both pomp and a touch of silliness, and knowing his broader career from, say, When Eight Bells Toll with Anthony Hopkins to years on the British stage adds richness to how we see him here. In the 2007 adaptation, we get Sally Hawkins as Anne. She's luminous in many ways, even if the script pushes her out of character at times. But look at who surrounds her. Anthony Head, yes, Giles from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as Sir Walter. For anyone who grew up with him as the measured, tweed-wrapped librarian, watching him swan about is delicious. You also get Rupert Penry-Jones as Wentworth, who has this kind of effortless handsomeness that makes you think, of course every Musgrove sister is fluttering. Even the adaptation misfires in tone, the casting makes it easy on the eyes. The 2022 adaptation, whatever you think of the liberties taken, the casting was clearly designed with reach in mind. Dakota Johnson as Anne was meant to draw in an international audience, and Cosmo Jarvis brought in a brooding Wentworth that tried to appeal beyond the Austen faithful. Sadly for me, he just seemed confused all the time. But the fun is in the details. Richard E. Grant as Sir Walter is pitch perfect. He leans into vanity with absurdity, with such relish that even viewers who hated the fourth wall breaks had to admit this was good casting. He's the kind of actor who can make you laugh at the character without losing the social critique underneath. The Netflix Persuasion leaned into what's often called colour-conscious casting, essentially not worrying about whether the ethnicity of actors reflects the historical setting, but instead aiming for inclusivity and representation. Regency England was not diverse in the way the adaptation suggests. So for viewers who are tuned into Austen's social detail, it kind of feels jarring. I found it hard to track who was who. The adaptation didn't just diversify casting, it also muddled the tone with character focus. So the inclusive choice wasn't anchored in a coherent version of the story. The Netflix version clearly wanted to modernise Austen for a global audience. Whether it succeeded depends on your tastes. Some felt it brought fresh faces into a well-worn story. Others felt it was more EastEnders on Empire waistlines than Austen's world of subtle ironies. Ultimately, then, each version reveals how adaptable Austen's characters really are, and can be played as faded and quiet, or luminous and emotionally open. Wentworth can be brooding or tender, and the supporting cast, from Sophie Thompson's comic timing to Anthony Head's unexpected vanity, it reminds us that Austen's satire is only as sharp as the actors who bring it alive. And it's why so many Austen fans end up playing the game of spot the actor across adaptations, because each one brings a slightly different shade to those timeless roles. So where does that leave us? After all the right notes and wrong turns, the bold choices and the questionable liberties, what can we actually say about Persuasion on screen? I think possibly the real answer is this. Each adaptation is a window into Austen's world, shaped by its own era. The 71 version feels stagey but earnest. The 95 one is elegant and faithful. The 2007 has its flashes of energy and romance, and even the Netflix version, with all its quirks, reminds us how alive Austen still feels to filmmakers today. So in my opinion, the real takeaway, Austen's work is strong enough, timeless enough to withstand all of these interpretations. And if one of them isn't to your taste, well, another one will probably be. Someone has created a playlist of all the episodes of the 1971 adaptation, and I'll leave a link up here. And I've watched all 4 now, back to back, and you know what I found? It gave me a much fuller visual understanding of the story, where I could take elements from this one and that one and create the bigger picture. So if you've only seen one version, maybe give another version a try. Revisit the 95 for its polish, or dip into the 71 for the vintage charm. Or if you're feeling brave, even sample the Netflix version. If only to remind yourself how Austen can survive even the strangest of treatments. Because at the end of the day, the aim of this video wasn't to score adaptations against each other, but to celebrate how Austen's characters live on. They keep walking across the stage, no matter the set dressing. And as we go forward in this series that I'm creating, diving deeper into Eliot, Wentworth, Lady Russell, and the rest, we'll keep in mind that it's the characters and Austen's insight into them that keep bringing us back again and again. And of course, if you're enjoying this journey through Persuasion, don't forget to subscribe and perhaps hit the notification bell so you won't miss what I'm hoping to be a Sunday release. I'm aiming to go for 7 p.m. UK time on a Sunday for my releases. But having said that, we've got plenty more Austen to explore, and I may well add the odd midweek release as well. Now, before I wrap up, a quick note. YouTube has invited me to set up membership section on this channel. Now, what that means is that for those of you who'd like to support my work a little further, there'll be an option to join and unlock some exclusive content. I'm kind of excited about this, but I'd love to hear from you. What kind of exclusive content would you actually enjoy? Maybe behind the scenes of how I make the videos, although I think that would be pretty boring. Early access to up-and-coming releases, or even some members-only deep dives. Let me know in the comments, and your ideas will help shape that membership section if I go ahead with it. If it's interesting, watch this space. I'll be sharing more details on that soon. So for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.